The morning sun cast long, honeyed fingers across the modest apartment, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air as Chloe Martinez faced her reflection. She adjusted the lapels of her navy blazer, a nervous habit she'd indulged in perhaps a dozen times already. Her hands, betraying her carefully constructed composure, trembled almost imperceptibly as she smoothed a stray strand of dark hair, desperately trying to quell the butterflies staging a riot in her stomach. Today was the day, the culmination of 6 months of relentless job searching since graduating from state. This wasn't just any interview. It was at Sterling Communications, the undisputed titan of the city's marketing scene, a firm whispered about in hushed, reverent tones by her professors. "You've got this, Chloe Mia," her grandmother, Rita, called out from the kitchen, her voice a warm, familiar anchor in the sea of Chloe's anxiety. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the comforting scent of toast filled the small, shared space, a testament to Rita's unwavering devotion. At 72, Rita Martinez had been Chloe's rock, her guiding star since she was a mere 8 years old. Rita had toiled tirelessly, working grueling double shifts at the hospital cafeteria, the clatter of trays and the smell of institutional food clinging to her clothes, all to ensure her granddaughter could pursue her dreams at the university. The wrinkles etched around her eyes deepened into familiar crinkles as she smiled, a roadmap of a life lived with love and sacrifice, and her silver hair was always impeccably pinned back, a sign of her enduring pride, even at this early hour. Chloe reached for her leather portfolio, a graduation gift from Rita. It was a splurge, a tangible symbol of Rita's belief in her, costing far more than they could comfortably afford, and she clutched it tightly as she kissed her grandmother's cheek. "The interview is at 10 sharp, Mr. Thompson specifically said they don't tolerate lateness," she said, her voice laced with a nervous energy. She glanced at her phone. It was already 8:30, and she needed to navigate the city's labyrinthine public transportation system, requiring 2 separate bus routes to reach downtown. That company would be lucky to have her. "You," Rita said, her eyes twinkling with unwavering confidence, as she pressed a travel mug filled with steaming coffee into Chloe's hands. "Remember what I always tell you. Kindness opens more doors than ambition ever could." Chloe smiled, appreciating her grandmother's homespun wisdom. Though today, if she were honest, she felt she needed ambition far more than kindness. This job at Sterling Communications wasn't simply an opportunity. It was her golden ticket, her chance to finally give Rita the comfortable, secure life she so richly deserved after years of selfless sacrifice. The journey downtown began, and the first bus arrived precisely on schedule, a small victory in the face of mounting pressure. Chloe found a seat near the window, the cool glass a soothing balm against her racing thoughts, and launched into one final, frantic review of her notes. She had meticulously memorized every detail about Sterling Communications. Their groundbreaking campaigns for luxury watches, their innovative expansion into social media marketing, even the names of the key players in the firm. This wasn't just any job. It was her dream position as a junior marketing coordinator, a stepping stone to a future filled with professional growth and the promise of advancement. Her phone buzzed, a welcome distraction, with a text from her best friend, Nina Foster. "Break a leg today. You're going to crush this interview. Coffee celebration tonight, regardless of what happens." Chloe smiled, feeling a surge of gratitude for Nina's unwavering support. They had been roommates throughout college until last month when Chloe made the practical, albeit bittersweet, decision to move back in with Rita to save money. Nina understood the relentless financial pressure better than anyone, working double shifts at the downtown coffee shop just to afford her tiny studio apartment. As the bus rumbled through the city streets, Chloe watched as the neighborhoods transformed, the familiar landscape of residential homes gradually giving way to the steel and glass canyons of the commercial district. Gleaming glass towers reflected the morning light, and impeccably dressed people in expensive suits strode purposefully along the sidewalks, exuding an air of power and success. Soon, she hoped, she would be one of them. A respected professional with a steady income, comprehensive benefits, and the ability to provide for her grandmother without constant worry. The transfer to the second bus went smoothly, a small miracle in the often chaotic ballet of public transportation, and Chloe checked her watch. 9:15, perfect timing. She would arrive at Sterling Communications with a comfortable 15 minutes to spare, allowing for any last-minute primping and mental preparation. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. An unexpected detour, a mere 3 blocks from her destination, brought Chloe's bus to an abrupt, jarring halt. Traffic had snarled, backing up completely, a symphony of frustrated honking and impatient drivers filling the air. Pressing her face against the window, she saw the problem. A sleek, black Mercedes had broken down in the right lane, creating a massive bottleneck during rush hour. Chloe checked her phone anxiously. She could still make it, albeit with no buffer, if the traffic cleared within the next few minutes. But each passing second ratcheted up her anxiety. Other passengers were grumbling about the delay, their faces etched with annoyance, and some were already getting off the bus, choosing to navigate the gridlock on foot. Through the bus window, she could see a man in an expensive charcoal suit standing beside the disabled Mercedes, his phone pressed to his ear. Even from a distance, she could sense his palpable frustration. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, as if he had been running his hands through it repeatedly, and he paced restlessly beside his immobile vehicle. James Harrison, though Chloe didn't yet know his name, was indeed experiencing a morning rapidly spiraling into disaster. The founder and CEO of Harrison Technologies, a multi-billion-dollar tech giant, was scheduled to be at his office for a crucial board meeting in 20 minutes. His usual driver had called in sick, forcing him to drive himself in his backup car, which had apparently chosen the worst possible moment to suffer a mechanical meltdown. "Carlos, I need you to send another car immediately," James barked into his phone, his voice tight with barely suppressed stress. "The engine just died, and I'm blocking traffic in the middle of downtown. This is a disaster." Watching the scene unfold through the bus window, Chloe felt a familiar tug in her chest, a gentle but insistent pull of conscience. Rita had always instilled in her the importance of helping others whenever she could, even when it wasn't convenient, even when it meant sacrificing her own comfort or time. The man looked genuinely distressed, and the traffic was growing exponentially worse by the minute. She glanced at her watch again. If she got off the bus now to offer assistance, she would almost certainly be late for her interview, jeopardizing everything she had worked so hard for. Mr. Thompson had been crystal clear about punctuality during their phone screening, emphasizing the company's rigid adherence to schedules and deadlines. But something about the man's predicament resonated with her. Maybe it was the way he kept checking his watch, his jaw tight with worry, or the way he offered an apologetic grimace to every honking driver who inched past, making it clear that he genuinely sorry for the inconvenience he was causing. Before she could talk herself out of it, before the fear of ruining her future could completely paralyze her, Chloe stood up and made her way to the front of the bus. "Excuse me, I need to get off here," she told the driver, her voice trembling slightly. "Lady, we're stuck in traffic. You sure you want to walk from here?" the driver asked, his tone laced with weary resignation as he gestured to the chaotic scene outside. "I'm sure," Chloe replied, taking a deep breath and stepping off the bus into the unexpectedly warm morning air. She could hear the driver muttering something about crazy passengers as the doors wheezed shut behind her. Dodging between the stopped cars, she approached the stranded Mercedes. The man was still on his phone, his back turned to her, as he frantically explained his situation to someone on the other end of the line. "Excuse me," Chloe called out, raising her voice to be heard over the cacophony of honking horns. "Do you need some help?" Seeing a young woman in professional attire approaching him, his first thought was how remarkably unusual it was for someone to stop and offer assistance in the cutthroat world of downtown traffic. His second thought was how disarmingly kind her brown eyes looked, despite the obvious concern etched on her face. "That's very nice of you to offer," James replied, abruptly ending his call. "But I really don't want to make you late for wherever you're going. You look like you have somewhere important to be." Chloe glanced at her watch. "I do have an important appointment, but maybe I can help quickly." "What seems to be the problem?" James gestured helplessly at his car. "The engine just died. No warning, no strange sounds. It just stopped running. I've called for assistance, but they won't be here for at least 30 minutes. Chloe took a deep breath. It was now or never. She decided to employ those unexpected skills. Chloe set down her portfolio on the sidewalk, the smooth leather feeling strangely out of place amidst the grit and grime of the city street, and approached the Mercedes with a newfound sense of determination. Mind if I take a look? How? James asked, raising a skeptical eyebrow. My uncle owned a garage when I was growing up. He taught me a few things about cars. James raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical but also undeniably impressed by her unexpected confidence. Really? In that outfit? The suit is new, but the knowledge isn't, Chloe replied with a small, determined smile, already moving toward the front of the car. Pop the hood for me. As James released the hood latch from inside the car, Chloe rolled up her sleeves slightly, revealing delicate wrists and the hint of a determined spirit, and lifted the heavy hood. The engine bay of the Mercedes was an intimidating labyrinth of wires, hoses, and gleaming metal, a complex puzzle she hadn't expected, but she had spent enough time around her Uncle Miguel's garage, inhaling the scent of oil and listening to his gruff explanations, to recognize common problems. She leaned over the engine, careful not to let her blazer touch anything oily or grimy, and began examining the various components, her brow furrowed in concentration. After a moment that stretched into an eternity, she spotted the issue. A loose battery terminal, its metallic glint dulled by a layer of accumulated grime, had vibrated free, cutting off power to the engine. I think I found your problem, Chloe announced, pointing to the disconnected cable. Your negative battery terminal came loose. It's probably from all the stop-and-go traffic this morning. James peered over her shoulder, his skepticism slowly melting away, replaced by a growing sense of amazement. Are you serious? It's really that simple? Sometimes the simplest problems cause the biggest headaches, Chloe replied, carefully reconnecting the terminal. Her manicured nails, meticulously shaped and polished specifically for the interview, scraped slightly against the cold metal, but she didn't care. Done. Try starting it now. James slid into the driver's seat and turned the key. The Mercedes purred to life immediately, its engine running smoothly and powerfully, as if nothing had happened. He got out of the car, his face a mask of amazement and gratitude, and shook his head in disbelief. I can't believe it, he said, still shaking his head. You just saved me from a very bad morning. How can I thank you? Chloe wiped her hands on a tissue from her purse, the lingering scent of her vanilla perfume mixing with the acrid smell of engine grease, and checked her watch. Her heart sank as she saw the time. Her interview was in 2 minutes, and she was still 6 blocks away. Actually, you don't need to thank me, she said, picking up her portfolio with slightly trembling hands. I'm just glad I could help. James noticed her distress immediately, recognizing the subtle shift in her demeanor, the way her shoulders slumped slightly, the faint tremor in her voice. You're late for something important, aren't you? Because you stopped to help me. I have a job interview in 2 minutes, Chloe admitted, trying to keep the crushing disappointment out of her voice. But it's fine. There'll be other opportunities. Even as she said the words, she knew they weren't true. Sterling Communications received hundreds of applications for every open position, each candidate vying for a chance to break into the competitive world of high-stakes marketing. This had been her one shot, her meticulously planned and fiercely pursued opportunity, and she had chosen to help a stranger instead of securing her future. Let me drive you, James offered immediately, his voice filled with genuine concern. It's the least I can do. Chloe hesitated, her mind racing. Getting into a car with a complete stranger went against every safety rule she had ever learned, a lesson drummed into her by Rita since she was a little girl. But something about this man, his genuine gratitude and his evident remorse for her predicament, seemed trustworthy, and she was undeniably desperate. I don't even know your name, she said, though she was already moving toward the passenger door, her decision made. James, he replied, opening the door for her with a courteous smile. And you are? Chloe Martinez, she answered, sliding into the luxurious leather seat. the scent of rich leather and subtle citrus filling her senses. The interview is at Sterling Communications on 5th Street. James's expression flickered with something. Surprise, recognition, or perhaps even a hint of concern. But it passed so quickly that Chloe didn't notice. He knew Sterling Communications well. In fact, he had been seriously considering acquiring them as part of Harrison Technologies' ongoing expansion strategy, recognizing their brand power and innovative marketing approaches. Racing against time, James drove with skillful precision through the increasingly congested downtown traffic, instinctively taking shortcuts that only someone intimately familiar with the city's hidden arteries would know. The Mercedes glided smoothly through the streets as Chloe, her anxiety still simmering beneath a veneer of composure, directed him toward the Sterling Communications building. "Wait a guy," James said. "So, what kind of job interview is this?" James asked, genuinely curious about the woman who had so selflessly sacrificed her own opportunity to help him. "Marketing coordinator position," Chloe replied, checking her appearance in the visor mirror, smoothing down her blazer and taking a deep breath to calm her frayed nerves. "It's my dream job, actually. I've been preparing for months." "What makes it your dream job?" James pressed, stealing glances at her as he expertly navigated the challenging traffic. Chloe's face lit up, her initial anxiety momentarily forgotten, as she launched into an enthusiastic explanation of her passion for marketing strategy, her fascination with consumer psychology, and her innovative ideas for brand development. James found himself genuinely impressed by her knowledge and passion, realizing that this wasn't just someone looking for any job. She truly understood and loved the field, possessing a rare combination of analytical acumen and creative flair. "Here we are," James announced as they pulled up in front of the gleaming Sterling Communications building, its imposing glass facade reflecting the cloud-dappled sky. The clock on the dashboard read 10:07, the crushing reality. Chloe rushed through the opulent lobby of Sterling Communications, her heels clicking sharply against the polished marble floor as she hurried toward the elevators, her heart pounding with a mixture of hope and dread. The receptionist, a stern-faced woman in her late 50s with perfectly coiffed hair and an air of unyielding authority, looked at her with barely concealed disapproval when she finally reached the front desk at 10:09. "I'm here for my interview with Mr. Thompson," Chloe said, slightly out of breath. "I'm Chloe Martinez. I know I'm a few minutes late, but there was traffic, and Mr. Thompson specifically instructed that anyone arriving after 10 o'clock would not be seen." The receptionist interrupted coldly, her voice devoid of empathy. "He left for another meeting 5 minutes ago." Chloe felt the words hit her like a physical blow, each syllable a hammer blow against her carefully constructed hopes. "Is there any way to reschedule?" she pleaded, her voice barely a whisper. "I was helping someone with a car emergency, and Mr. Thompson doesn't reschedule," the woman replied, not even bothering to look up from her computer screen. "Is there anything else?" "And you?" the woman replied, not even looking up from her computer. "Good day, Miss Martinez." Standing in the pristine lobby, surrounded by awards and accolades for marketing campaigns she had studied religiously, dissected in her college courses, and dreamed of contributing to, Chloe felt her carefully constructed dreams crumbling around her, shattering into a million irreparable pieces. The portfolio in her hands, once a symbol of hope and potential, suddenly felt heavy and burdensome, filled with meticulously prepared presentations and innovative marketing strategies that would now never be seen, never be considered. Unexpected kindness. As Chloe walked slowly and dejectedly back toward the building exit, her shoulders slumped with disappointment, she saw James waiting patiently by his Mercedes, which was parked illegally in a loading zone, apparently unconcerned about the potential parking ticket. "How did it go?" he asked, though her downcast expression already told him the answer. "They wouldn't see me," Chloe replied, trying to keep her voice steady, but the tremor of disappointment was undeniable. "I was 9 minutes late, and apparently that's unforgivable in their world." James felt a surge of anger toward Sterling Communications, a company he had once considered acquiring, though he kept it carefully hidden beneath a veneer of polite concern. Any company that would dismiss a promising candidate over 9 minutes, especially someone who had been delayed because of an act of selfless kindness, clearly didn't understand the true value of character. "I'm so sorry," he said sincerely, his eyes filled with genuine empathy. "This is my fault. You were helping me when you should have been protecting your own interests." Chloe shook her head, her gaze fixed on the polished marble of the sidewalk. "I made the choice. My grandmother always says that kindness is more important than personal gain. I guess today I proved I actually believe that." James studied her face, searching for any trace of regret, any hint of anger or resentment, but saw only a quiet acceptance, a subtle strength that belied her obvious disappointment. This woman had sacrificed a major opportunity for a complete stranger, without hesitation, and wasn't even remotely angry about it. In his world of ruthless business dealings, calculated decisions, and the constant pursuit of profit, such genuine altruism was almost unimaginable, a refreshing anomaly in the cynical landscape of corporate ambition. "Can I at least buy you coffee?" James offered, his voice laced with sincerity. "I know it doesn't make up for what happened, but I'd like to do something." Chloe looked at this kind stranger who had driven her to her interview, offered her comfort in her disappointment, and shown her a level of compassion she hadn't expected, her kindness. Despite everything that had gone wrong, despite the crushing weight of her shattered dreams, she found herself smiling, a genuine smile that reached her eyes and chased away the shadows of disappointment. "Coffee sounds perfect," she said. "I could definitely use a friend right now." They walked away from Sterling Communications together, two strangers who had been brought together by a broken-down car and a moment of unexpected kindness. Neither of them realized that this shared moment of disappointment would eventually become the foundation of something far more valuable than any job could ever be. Sometimes the most important doors open only after others have slammed shut. And sometimes, helping a stranger on a busy street is the first step toward an extraordinary future, a journey neither of them could have possibly imagined. The small downtown cafe buzzed with the vibrant energy of the morning rush as James and Chloe settled into a quiet corner table by the window, seeking refuge from the bustling crowds and the relentless demands of the city. The rich aroma of freshly ground coffee beans filled the air, a comforting scent that mingled with the soft, soothing melodies of jazz music playing in the background, creating a welcome haven of tranquility. Chloe wrapped her hands around her warm mug, finding solace in its simple pleasure after the morning's crushing disappointment. "So, tell me about yourself, Chloe Martinez," James said, leaning forward with genuine curiosity. He had removed his suit jacket, revealing the subtly textured fabric of his tailored shirt, and looking more relaxed despite the expensive watch on his wrist and the subtle, almost imperceptible signs of wealth that Chloe didn't even notice. "What makes you tick?" "Not much to tell. Really?" Chloe replied with a self-deprecating smile, the weight of her recent setback still lingering in her voice. "Recent college graduate living with my grandmother and, apparently, unemployable according to Sterling Communications." "I doubt that's true," James said, stirring his coffee thoughtfully. "Anyone who can diagnose a car problem while wearing a business suit and chooses to help a stranger over their own self-interests clearly has valuable qualities that any company would be lucky to have." Chloe studied his face, noticing the sincere interest in his eyes, the genuine warmth in his smile. There was something different about James, a quiet confidence that came from more than just good looks or expensive clothes. It was an air of self-assuredness, coupled with a disarming humility, that drew her in and made her feel instantly comfortable in his presence. "What about you?" she asked, eager to shift the focus away from her own misfortunes. "What do you do when you're not having car trouble in traffic jams?" James hesitated for a moment, caught off guard by the question. He was so accustomed to people knowing exactly who he was, recognizing his name and associating it with his wealth and power, that this anonymity felt both strange and surprisingly refreshing. "I work in technology," he said, carefully choosing his words, knowing that it was technically true, but also deliberately vague. "Problem-solving, team management, that sort of thing." "Sounds important," Chloe observed, noting the quality of his suit, the subtle elegance of his watch, and the way he carried himself with an air of quiet authority. "Must be successful at it." "I've been fortunate," James replied modestly, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. But success means different things to different people. This morning, for instance, you were more successful than I was. How so? I'm the one who missed my interview, Chloe said, her brow furrowing in confusion. You succeeded at being the kind of person your grandmother raised you to be, James said softly, his gaze locking with hers. That's worth more than any job, more than any amount of money. Chloe felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words, a comforting sensation that chased away the lingering chill of disappointment. In that moment, the stranger's understanding, his unwavering belief in the importance of kindness and integrity, meant more to her than she could possibly express. A new reality. 3 weeks had passed since the fateful morning in downtown traffic, and Chloe's life had settled into a routine she hadn't planned. A far cry from the ambitious career trajectory she had envisioned. Working part-time at Morrison's bookstore downtown, shelving books and assisting customers, and tutoring high school students in the evenings, helping them navigate the complexities of algebra and literature, she was barely making ends meet. Her income just enough to cover her basic expenses and contribute a small amount to Rita's household budget. The bookstore job paid minimum wage, but she loved being surrounded by stories, inhaling the scent of aged paper and leather-bound books, and helping customers discover their next great read. It was a temporary solution, a means to an end, but she found a quiet satisfaction in the simple act of connecting people with the power of literature. Any word from Sterling Communications? Asked Nina Foster as she wiped down the tables at Brew and Bean, the bustling coffee shop where she worked, the clatter of espresso machines and the murmur of conversations creating a lively backdrop. Nina's auburn hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her green apron bore the telltale coffee stains from the busy morning rush. Nothing, Chloe replied, shelving returned books in the bookstore's cozy fiction section, her voice tinged with a lingering disappointment. I've sent 3 follow-up emails and called twice. They won't even let me reschedule. Nina frowned, pausing in her cleaning. Their loss. You would have revolutionized their marketing department. Thanks for the confidence boost, Chloe said, though she couldn't hide the disappointment that still lingered. That job at Sterling Communications had represented everything she had worked toward. Financial stability, career growth, and the ability to finally take care of Rita, the way her grandmother had tirelessly taken care of her. Speaking of confidence boosts, Nina said with a mischievous grin, her eyes twinkling with amusement. There's this guy who's been coming in here almost every day asking about you. Chloe looked up from the book she was arranging, her heart skipping a beat. Asking about me? What guy? Tall, dark hair, expensive suits, gorgeous smile, Nina said, ticking off the descriptors on her fingers. Says his name is James and that you two met a few weeks ago. He always orders a large coffee and asks if I've seen you lately. Chloe felt her heart skip a beat, a flutter of anticipation mixed with a healthy dose of disbelief. She had thought about James often since their coffee meeting, wondering about the kind stranger who had shown her such unexpected compassion. But she had assumed their paths would never cross again, that their connection was a fleeting moment of kindness in the vast and indifferent landscape of the city. He seems really interested in seeing you again, Nina continued, clearly enjoying her friend's obvious reaction. I told him you usually come by on Wednesday afternoons to study. Nina Foster, you didn't, Chloe said, though she wasn't entirely upset about it. A small part of her, the hopeful romantic buried beneath layers of practicality and self-preservation, had secretly hoped that James would find a way to reconnect. I absolutely did, Nina replied, shrugging her shoulders with a playful smile. Life's too short not to give nice guys a chance to find you. Chance meetings. Wednesday afternoon found Chloe at her usual table in Brew and Bean, surrounded by marketing textbooks, dog-eared case studies, and a stack of neatly printed job applications. Her brow furrowed in concentration as she meticulously reviewed the latest marketing trends and meticulously crafted cover letters. She was determined to keep her skills sharp while searching for new opportunities, even if it meant studying on her own time, fueled by caffeine and sheer force of will. The familiar chime of the door made her look up, her breath catching in her throat when she saw James enter the cafe. He spotted her immediately, his face lighting up with genuine pleasure. Chloe, he said, his voice warm and inviting, as he approached her table with 2 steaming coffee cups in hand. What a pleasant surprise. Mind if I join you? Of course, she replied quickly, closing her textbook on consumer behavior and trying to suppress the blush that was creeping up her neck. Though I should warn you, I'm not the best company today. Job hunting is depressing work. James set one of the coffees in front of her, recognizing the familiar caramel macchiato, her favorite, though she couldn't remember ever telling him that. He had a knack for noticing the small details, the subtle preferences that made her feel seen and appreciated. Still no luck with interviews? He asked, his voice filled with genuine empathy. A few calls, but nothing promising, Chloe admitted, picking up the coffee and inhaling the sweet aroma. Turns out, being late to the most prestigious firm in the city doesn't look good on your reputation. Their reputation should be the one suffering, James said with unexpected intensity, his eyes flashing with a hint of anger. Any company that judges candidates by 9 minutes instead of character doesn't deserve talent like yours. Chloe studied his face, touched by his fierce defense, his unwavering belief in her potential. You barely know me, James. How can you be so sure about my character? Because I've seen who you are when it matters, he replied simply, his gaze locking with hers. That morning in traffic, you had every reason to walk past my car and protect your own interests. Instead, you chose to help a complete stranger. That tells me everything I need to know. They talked for over an hour, the conversation flowing effortlessly from career aspirations to family stories to shared interests, each of them revealing small pieces of themselves, building a connection that felt both comfortable and exhilarating. James listened intently as Chloe described her grandmother's sacrifices, her own dreams of financial independence, and her passion for creative marketing strategies, peppering her stories with witty anecdotes and thoughtful insights. You know, James said thoughtfully as their conversation began to wind down, stirring his coffee slowly, I might know of some opportunities in the tech sector. My company is always looking for talented marketing professionals. Chloe's eyes widened with interest, a spark of hope flickering in their depths. Really? What kind of company is it? Growing fast, innovative projects, good benefits, James replied, being deliberately vague, wanting to protect her from any preconceived notions or biases. Would you be interested in learning more? Absolutely, Chloe said, feeling a surge of optimism for the first time in weeks. I'd love to hear about it. James pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts, his fingers moving with practiced efficiency. Let me connect you with our HR department. I'll put in a good word. Growing connections. Over the following weeks, James became a regular part of Chloe's routine, his presence a comforting constant in her otherwise unpredictable life. He would appear at the bookstore during her shifts, casually browsing the business section while engaging her in stimulating conversations about marketing trends, consumer psychology, and the ever-evolving landscape of social media. He visited Brew and Bean on the days when she studied there, always bringing her favorite coffee, a caramel macchiato with an extra shot of espresso, and asking thoughtful questions about her ideas, encouraging her to pursue her dreams with unwavering enthusiasm. Carlos Rivera, James's trusted assistant and longtime friend, watched this developing routine with growing concern, his analytical mind working overtime to assess the potential risks and complications. A sharp-dressed man in his early 40s with salt and pepper hair and an air of quiet efficiency, Carlos had been with Harrison Technologies since its early days, witnessing the company's meteoric rise and James's relentless dedication to its success. Sir, with all due respect, this situation with Miss Martinez is becoming complicated, Carlos said during one of their morning briefings in James's penthouse office overlooking the city, his voice laced with caution. James looked up from the financial reports he had been reviewing, his brow furrowed in confusion. What situation, Carlos? You've been visiting her workplace almost daily for 3 weeks. You're personally involved in her job search, and she still has no idea who you really are, Carlos said, his tone careful but direct. What happens when she discovers that James from downtown is actually James Harrison, founder and CEO of Harrison Technologies? James set down his papers, his gaze drifting toward the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the city. The sprawling metropolis spread out beneath him like a living map. Somewhere down there, amidst the countless buildings and bustling streets, Chloe was probably at the bookstore, helping customers and dreaming of a better future, her spirit undaunted by the challenges she faced. "I've never met anyone like her, Carlos," James said quietly, his voice filled with a rare vulnerability. "In my world, everyone wants something. Money, connections, opportunities. But Chloe doesn't even know what I could offer her. She likes me for who I am, not what I have. And that's incredibly refreshing. And that's exactly why this is dangerous," Carlos replied, his voice firm but tinged with concern. "When she finds out you've been deceiving her, she'll feel manipulated, used. You're setting both of you up for heartbreak." James knew his friend was right, that his carefully constructed facade was built on a foundation of deception. But he couldn't bring himself to end what had become the most genuine relationship of his adult life, a connection that transcended the superficiality of wealth and power. For the first time since building his empire, he felt like a regular person, rather than a target for gold diggers and fortune seekers, someone who could be appreciated for his character, not his bank account. Acts of service. Meanwhile, Chloe had begun to notice James's consistent presence in her life, his seemingly coincidental appearances becoming a comforting routine, something she looked forward to each day. She appreciated his support, his encouragement, and his genuine interest in her well-being. But she couldn't help but wonder what motivated his unwavering attention. Was he simply being a friend, a mentor, or was there something more beneath the surface? She struggled to reconcile the image of the successful, sophisticated man she knew as James with the possibility that he might be interested in her romantically, a notion that seemed both exciting and terrifying. She was drawn to his kindness, his intelligence, and his unwavering belief in her potential. But she was also wary of the power imbalance between them, the unspoken knowledge that he possessed resources and influence that she could only dream of. With a mixture of gratitude and curiosity, she found that he seemed to appear whenever she needed a friend most. During frustrating job interviews, difficult days at the bookstore, or moments when the financial pressure felt overwhelming, threatening to suffocate her. His presence was a balm to her weary spirit, a reminder that she wasn't alone in her struggles, that someone cared about her well-being, and that she was worthy of love and respect. "He brought you flowers again," Rita observed one evening, her eyes twinkling with amusement as Chloe arranged a bouquet of daisies in a mason jar. Their simple beauty a stark contrast to the opulent displays she had seen in the lobbies of corporate offices. They were simple flowers, not expensive roses or exotic orchids, which somehow made them more meaningful, a gesture of genuine affection rather than a display of wealth. "He said they reminded him of my smile," Chloe replied, unable to hide her own smile at the memory, her cheeks flushing with a warmth that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. Rita studied her granddaughter's face with the wisdom of 7 decades, her eyes seeing beyond the surface, recognizing the subtle signs of burgeoning affection and the quiet joy that had begun to bloom within Chloe's heart. "This James sounds like a good man, Mia," Rita said softly, her voice filled with a gentle hope. "Be careful with your heart," Rita cautioned, her eyes holding a depth of understanding. "Do you think men with expensive clothes and watches usually have expensive secrets?" she asked gently, probing Chloe's thoughts. "Just make sure you know who he really is before you fall too deeply." Chloe glanced down, her fingers lightly touching the simple gold watch on James' wrist, a piece she had noticed but never questioned. Rita's words resonated, a quiet alarm bell in her mind. Everything about James, his demeanor, his confidence, suggested a level of success and wealth far exceeding what a typical tech employee might possess. But did it truly matter? He had shown her nothing but kindness, respect, and genuine interest. The next day arrived with a surprising turn. An email notification popped up. The HR department at Harrison Technologies had called to schedule an interview for a marketing coordinator position. Chloe could barely contain her excitement. Clutching her phone, she rushed to share the news with James over their morning coffee. "They want to meet with me next week," she exclaimed, her eyes shining with newfound hope. I can't believe your recommendation worked so quickly. A sharp pang of guilt stabbed at James' conscience as he witnessed her gratitude. She was completely unaware that he was the owner of Harrison Technologies, that his recommendation was essentially an executive order, or that the HR department was treating her application as a personal favor to their CEO. You'll do great, he said sincerely, pushing back the rising tide of deceit. Just be yourself. That's all anyone could ask for, Chloe replied, her smile radiant. As Chloe began preparing for her interview, the weight of his secrets became a crushing burden for James. He had created a delicate situation, a web of deception where the woman he was falling for would soon be working for him, completely oblivious to his true identity. This has gone too far, James, Carlos warned sternly during their next morning briefing. The crisp morning sunlight streamed into James' office as Carlos stood before him, his expression a mixture of concern and disapproval. When she walks into that interview, she'll see your photo plastered on the wall, your biography in the company materials. This house of cards is about to collapse. James ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Chloe would have recognized from their very first meeting. The gesture always accompanied a sense of frustration and internal conflict. I need to tell her the truth, he declared. Right after the interview, regardless of whether she gets the job. I'll explain everything then. Carlos shook his head slowly, a shadow of doubt darkening his features. Sir, she's going to feel utterly betrayed. You've been lying to her for weeks. I never lied, James protested, the defensiveness rising in his voice. I just didn't tell her everything. In a relationship, that's essentially the same thing, Carlos replied bluntly, his words hanging heavy in the air. The interview at Harrison Technologies unfolded flawlessly. Chloe impressed the marketing director, a seasoned professional named Ms. Davison, with her innovative ideas and her passionate understanding of consumer engagement. The state-of-the-art offices, the generous salary offer, and the comprehensive benefits package seemed almost too good to be true. We'd like to offer you the position, Ms. Davison announced with a warm smile at the end of their meeting. Can you start on Monday? Chloe accepted immediately, her heart soaring with relief and uncontainable excitement. Financial stability was finally within reach. She could take care of Rita, pursue her career dreams, and build the future she had always envisioned. That evening, she rushed to meet James at their usual cafe, her face practically glowing with happiness. I got the job, she announced triumphantly. I can't believe it. Harrison Technologies. Full benefits. A salary that's twice what I even hoped for. Thank you so much for making this possible. James felt his heart simultaneously soar with joy and sink with dread. Her happiness was everything he had hoped for, but it was built on a fragile foundation of secrets that was about to crumble. Chloe, he began, knowing he could no longer delay the inevitable confrontation. There's something I need to tell you about Harrison Technologies, about me. But before he could continue, Chloe's phone rang, the shrill ringtone slicing through the air like a cold knife. It was an emergency call that would change everything once again. The phone call came at the worst possible moment, interrupting the confession that hung heavy in the air. Chloe's face drained of all color as she listened to the voice on the other end, her hand trembling as she gripped the device. What is it? James asked immediately, his voice laced with concern as he witnessed her distress. It's my grandmother, Chloe whispered, her voice barely audible as she ended the call. She collapsed at the grocery store. They're taking her to General Hospital. Without a second's hesitation, James stood up and gently took her arm. Come on, he said, his voice calm and reassuring. I'll drive you there. The ride to the hospital passed in a blur of city lights and anxious silence. James navigated through the heavy traffic with the same skillful ease he had displayed on their first meeting, while Chloe sat beside him, struggling to process the fragmented information the paramedic had relayed. Rita had suffered a severe heart attack and was being rushed into emergency surgery at the hospital. Chloe paced frantically in the sterile waiting room, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows around her. James sat quietly nearby, offering silent support, his presence a comforting anchor in the swirling storm of her anxiety. Nina arrived within the hour, having closed the coffee shop early, her face etched with worry. "Any news?" Nina asked, wrapping Chloe in a tight hug. "She's in surgery," Chloe replied, her voice hollow with worry. "They said it was a major heart attack." Nina squeezed her shoulder, offering silent comfort. "The surgeon thinks she needs a triple bypass," Chloe continued, her voice cracking with emotion. "But the cost." She trailed off, unable to voice the crushing weight of the financial burden. James had been listening from his chair, his heart aching for Chloe's obvious anguish. "What about insurance?" he asked gently, breaking the tense silence. "Medicare covers some of it, but not everything," Chloe explained, her voice filled with despair. "The surgeon said we're looking at over $200,000 in medical bills. Even with payment plans, I'll never be able to afford it." Tears finally spilled down Chloe's cheeks, tracing paths through the remnants of her makeup. "I just got this amazing job, and it's still not enough to save her." Nina rubbed Chloe's back soothingly, her touch offering a small measure of comfort. "We'll figure something out," she said, her voice firm despite the uncertainty of the situation. "Maybe the hospital has charity programs, or we could set up a fundraiser." James stood up abruptly, his face set with a determined expression. "I'll be right back," he said, stepping out into the hallway to make a quick phone call. Nina moved closer, recognizing that her friend was on the verge of a complete breakdown. "Chloe, maybe we should talk about this later, when you're not so upset." "I'm upset because I trusted him," Chloe said, her voice rising with a hint of anger. "I thought he cared about me for who I am, not because I was some charity case he wanted to fix." James felt his heart shatter at her words. The accusation hung in the air, sharp and unforgiving. "You were never a charity case," James replied, his voice filled with genuine sincerity. "You saved my morning, remember? You helped me when you had every reason not to. And apparently, you've been trying to repay that debt ever since." Chloe replied bitterly, her eyes blazing with resentment. "The job, the coffee dates, the attention. It was all guilt, wasn't it?" James was unable to respond, the truth of her words stinging like a slap. A doctor in surgical scrubs approached them, his expression professional but reassuring. "Family of Rita Martinez?" Chloe immediately turned to the doctor, her anger temporarily forgotten in the face of more pressing concerns. "I'm her granddaughter. How is she?" "The surgery went well," the doctor said with a reassuring smile. "We were able to perform the bypass successfully. She's stable now and should make a full recovery with proper care and rehabilitation." Chloe sank back into her chair with relief, the overwhelming emotional weight of the evening finally crashing down on her. "Thank you, doctor. When can I see her?" "She'll be in recovery for several hours, but you should be able to visit briefly in the morning. I should also mention there's been a change in her care plan. She's being transferred to Presbyterian Medical Center for specialized cardiac recovery. All expenses will be covered by an anonymous donation through the Harrison Foundation." Chloe's head snapped up, her eyes widening as she stared at James, who was studying his hands intently, avoiding her gaze. "You did this?" she said quietly, her voice filled with a mixture of disbelief and dawning understanding. "The Harrison Foundation helps families facing medical emergencies," James replied without looking up, his voice low. "It's what the foundation exists for." After the doctor left, an uncomfortable silence settled over the small group, thick with unspoken emotions. Chloe was torn between overwhelming gratitude for her grandmother's life being saved and deep hurt over James' deception. "I need some air," she announced, rising and walking towards the hospital exit. James started to follow her, but Nina placed a restraining hand on his arm. "Give her a few minutes," she advised, her voice soft but firm. "This is a lot to process." Outside, Chloe stood in the cool night air, trying to sort through her conflicted emotions. On one hand, James had just saved her grandmother's life with his immense generosity. On the other hand, everything she thought she knew about him and their relationship had been built on incomplete truths, carefully curated to hide his true identity. When James joined her a few minutes later, She didn't acknowledge his presence at first, continuing to stare out at the glittering city skyline. "I know you're angry," he said softly, his voice filled with remorse. "You have every right to be." "I don't even know what I am," Chloe replied, her voice strained, still staring out at the cityscape, grateful, hurt, confused, overwhelmed. "You saved Rita's life tonight, and I'll never be able to repay that. But I also feel like I don't even know who you really are." "I'm the same person who bought you coffee and listened to your dreams," James said, stepping closer to her. "I'm the same person who thinks you're brilliant and kind and stronger than anyone should have to be. The money doesn't change who I am inside." Chloe turned to face him, her expression a mixture of anger and vulnerability. "But it changes everything else," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The job you got me, the attention you've given me, even this conversation. How do I know what's real and what's just a billionaire playing games with people's lives? Because you know me," James replied with quiet intensity, his eyes locking with hers. "These past weeks you've seen who I really am. Not the CEO, not the billionaire. It's James, the man who panicked when his car broke down, who looks forward to coffee conversations, who thinks you're amazing exactly as you are. But you have been the billionaire the whole time," Chloe pointed out, her voice laced with pain. "You chose to hide that from me, which means you chose to let me struggle when you could have helped." James ran his hand through his hair, a gesture she now recognized as his tell when he was frustrated or nervous. "I've been used before, Chloe," he confessed, his voice filled with vulnerability. "Women who pretended to care about me, but really just wanted access to my money and my lifestyle." He paused, searching for the right words to express the depth of his feelings. "I met you, and for the first time in years, someone liked me without knowing what I could give them. That felt—" He paused again, his voice thick with emotion. "That felt like everything." The next morning, Rita was awake and alert in her private room at Presbyterian Medical Center. The facility was clearly in a different league, boasting state-of-the-art equipment and an attentive nursing staff that made General Hospital look like a basic clinic in comparison. Rita," she said weakly as Chloe entered the room, her eyes twinkling with amusement. "This place is fancy. How are we paying for this?" Chloe sat down beside her grandmother's bed, gently taking her hand. "A foundation is covering everything," she said softly. "You don't need to worry about money right now." "What foundation?" Rita asked, her eyes sharp despite her physical weakness. "The Harrison Foundation," Chloe replied quietly, bracing herself for her grandmother's reaction. Rita studied her granddaughter's face carefully, her gaze penetrating. "And does this have anything to do with your James?" "His last name is Harrison," Chloe admitted, her voice barely audible. "He's the one who arranged everything." "Ah," Rita said with understanding, a knowing glint in her eyes. "So, he has expensive secrets just like I thought. ABA, he's a billionaire. He owns the company that just hired me. He's been lying to me for weeks about who he really is." Rita was quiet for a long moment, processing this information, her brow furrowed in thought. "But he saved my life," she said finally, her voice filled with a quiet wisdom. "Yes," Chloe acknowledged, her voice still laced with resentment. "And he gave you a good job." "Yes," Rita agreed. "And in these past weeks, has he treated you well?" "Well, with respect and kindness." Chloe nodded, unable to deny James' consistent thoughtfulness and genuine care. "Then maybe," Rita said slowly, her voice thoughtful, "the question isn't why he didn't tell you about his money. Maybe the question is why you're more upset about the money than grateful for the man." "I don't understand what you mean," Chloe said, her brow furrowed in confusion. Rita squeezed her granddaughter's hand, her eyes filled with warmth. "Rich or poor, he chose to help you that first morning when his car broke down. Rich or poor, he spent weeks getting to know you as a person. Rich or poor, he saved your old abuela's life last night. The money changes the scale of his generosity, but it doesn't change his heart." "But he lied to me," Chloe protested, her voice filled with hurt. "He protected himself." It's like you protected yourself by assuming he was ordinary, Rita corrected gently. Sometimes we don't reveal everything about ourselves until we know it's safe. 2 days later, Chloe returned to her apartment to find a sealed envelope that had been slipped under her door. Inside was a handwritten letter from James and a set of keys. The elegant script on the envelope caught the dim hallway light. Chloe picked it up with a sense of trepidation, her heart pounding in her chest. Tearing it open, she unfolded the crisp paper, her eyes scanning the heartfelt words. Dear Chloe, the letter began. I know I've made mistakes in how I handled our relationship, and I know you need time to decide if you can forgive me. But I wanted you to know that regardless of what you decide about us, some things remain true. Your job at Harrison Technologies is yours because you earned it with your talent and passion, not because of any personal connection. Your grandmother's medical care will continue to be covered because that's what decent people do for each other, not because I expect anything in return. And these keys belong to the apartment upstairs from yours, which I've purchased for Rita's recovery. She'll need somewhere quiet and comfortable to heal, and you'll need to be close enough to help her. This isn't about money or obligation. It's about doing what's right for the people I care about. If you can find it in your heart to give us another chance, I'll be waiting at the place where we first shared coffee tomorrow at noon. If not, I'll understand, and I'll respect your decision. Either way, you and Rita are taken care of because that's what people do for the ones they love. James. Chloe read the letter 3 times, her emotions swirling through gratitude, frustration, and something that felt dangerously close to love. With trembling hands, she climbed the stairs to the apartment above hers and used the keys to open the door. The space was beautiful, bathed in warm sunlight streaming through the large windows. It was a fully furnished 2-bedroom apartment with a view of the park, modern appliances gleaming in the spacious kitchen, and everything Rita would need for a comfortable and peaceful recovery. The decor was tasteful and elegant, generous without being ostentatious, practical without being impersonal. That evening, Chloe sat with Nina at Brew and Bean, staring at the letter and the set of keys lying on the table between them. The aroma of coffee swirled around them, a familiar comfort in the midst of her turmoil. So, what are you going to do? Nina asked gently. After hearing the whole story, her eyes filled with concern. Chloe sighed, running her fingers over the smooth paper of the letter. I don't know, she replied honestly, her voice laced with confusion. Part of me feels manipulated, like he used his money to solve problems instead of being honest with me. She paused, gazing out the window at the bustling street. And the other part remembers how he looked at me during our conversations, how he listened when I talked about my dreams, how he made me feel like the most interesting person in the room. Chloe paused again, her voice barely above a whisper. The other part wonders if maybe Rita is right. Maybe I'm punishing him for having money instead of focusing on what kind of person he is. Nina reached across the table, gently taking Chloe's hand. What does your heart tell you? She asked softly, her eyes filled with empathy. Chloe closed her eyes, taking a deep breath, and thought about James' infectious laugh, his genuine interest in her ideas, the way he had driven her to the hospital without being asked, his quiet strength during a crisis. My heart tells me that he's a good man who made some bad choices about honesty, she confessed, her voice barely audible. My head tells me that relationships built on secrets don't usually work. But what if? Nina suggested, her voice thoughtful. What if this isn't about the foundation being built on secrets? What if this is about 2 people who found something real and now have to decide if it's worth fighting for? The next day at noon, Chloe stood hesitantly outside the cafe where she and James had shared their first real conversation. The midday sun streamed through the windows, illuminating the cozy interior. Through the window, she could see him sitting alone at the same corner table, his head bent, staring at his hands while he waited. He looked lost and vulnerable, a stark contrast to the confident CEO she knew he was. She took a deep breath, steeling her resolve, and pushed open the door, the small bell above the entrance jingling softly. James looked up as she approached, his expression a complex mixture of hope and resignation. I wasn't sure you'd come, he said quietly. his voice filled with a tentative hope as she sat down across from him. I wasn't sure either, Chloe replied honestly, her eyes meeting his. I've been thinking about what you said, about what Rita said, about what I want. And what do you want? James asked softly, his gaze unwavering. Chloe met his eyes directly, her voice clear and strong. I want honesty, complete honesty, even when it's uncomfortable or complicated. You have it, James promised immediately, his voice filled with sincerity. I want to be sure that you care about me for who I am, not because I'm some project you want to fix. Chloe, you fixed me, James replied, his voice thick with emotion. Remember that morning when you chose to help a stranger instead of protecting your own interests? You reminded me that good people still exist. I didn't need fixing, Chloe countered softly. You needed opportunity, and I'm grateful I could provide it. I want to know that if we do this, if we try to build something together, it's as equals. It's not as a billionaire and his charity case. James reached across the table and gently took her hand, his touch sending a shiver of warmth through her. You're the strongest, most capable person I know, he said, his voice filled with admiration. You built yourself up from nothing, took care of your grandmother, and never lost your kindness despite facing disappointments that would have made others bitter. I don't want to be your savior, Chloe. I want to be your partner. Chloe felt the last remaining walls around her heart begin to crumble, piece by piece. The job at Harrison Technologies is yours regardless of what happens between us personally, James continued, his voice firm. Your ideas during the interview were brilliant. The marketing director has been raving about you for days. And Rita's medical care will continue because it's the right thing to do. Not his leverage, not his obligation. Just because family takes care of family. Chloe raised an eyebrow, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. Family? James smiled, the first genuine smile she had seen from him since the revelation. A smile that reached his eyes and warmed his entire face. I'm hoping that's where we're headed, if you'll have me. 6 months later, Chloe stood in her new office at Harrison Technologies, gazing out at the sprawling city skyline as she reviewed the details of a marketing campaign that had just won a prestigious national award. Her innovative approach to consumer engagement had revolutionized the company's brand strategy and earned her a well-deserved promotion to senior marketing director. James knocked softly on her doorframe, holding 2 steaming cups of coffee, the familiar aroma filling the air. Busy morning? He asked, his eyes sparkling with amusement. The best kind, Chloe replied, accepting her caramel macchiato with a grateful smile. The Peterson account just approved our proposal for their product launch. That's my brilliant girlfriend, James said with obvious pride, his voice laced with affection. Ready for lunch with Rita? They had established a cherished weekly tradition of dining with Rita, who had made a full and remarkable recovery, and was now living comfortably in the apartment James had thoughtfully purchased. She had become like a grandmother to James as well, offering her unique brand of wisdom and keeping both of them grounded despite their growing success. Actually, James said, his voice suddenly taking on a nervous quality that Chloe instantly recognized. A subtle shift in his demeanor that sent a flutter of anticipation through her heart. There's something I wanted to ask you. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, its rich color a stark contrast to his dark suit. With a deep breath, he dropped to one knee right there in her office, the click of the box opening echoing in the otherwise silent room. Chloe Martinez, he said, his voice filled with emotion, his eyes locking with hers. You changed my life the moment you chose to help a stranger instead of protecting your own interests. You've made me a better man, a better leader, and a better human being. Will you marry me? Chloe looked down at the man who had started as a stranger with car trouble and had become her partner in every sense of the word. Her heart swelled with love and gratitude, overflowing with a joy she had never thought possible. Yes, she said without hesitation, her voice filled with happiness. But next time you want to propose, maybe don't do it at the office. People will think I only said yes because you're my boss. James laughed, a deep, resonant sound that filled the room, as he slipped the sparkling ring onto her finger, his eyes shining with love. "Let them think what they want," he said, his voice warm. "We know the truth." "What's that?" Chloe asked, her brow raised in playful curiosity. James gently cupped her face in his hands, his eyes filled with tenderness. "That sometimes the best things in life start with a broken-down car and a kind heart." As they embraced in her office overlooking the glittering city, Chloe reflected on how dramatically her life had changed from that seemingly insignificant morning when she had missed her interview at Sterling Communications. She had lost one opportunity, but she had gained something infinitely more valuable. A love built on mutual respect, shared values, and the kind of honesty that only comes after working through difficult truths together. Rita was right, as she usually was. Kindness really did open more doors than ambition ever could. And sometimes, helping a stranger with a flat tire was just the beginning of the most extraordinary journey of all. 1 year later, the Harrison Foundation hosted its annual charity gala in the grand ballroom of the city's most prestigious hotel. The room glittered with lights and shimmering gowns as guests mingled, their voices a low hum of excitement and anticipation. Chloe, now Chloe Harrison, stood beside her husband as they welcomed guests to an evening dedicated to providing emergency medical assistance to families in crisis. Her smile radiant as she greeted old friends and new acquaintances. "Ladies and gentlemen," James addressed the elegantly dressed crowd from the podium, his voice filled with warmth and sincerity. "This foundation exists because my wife taught me that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the difference we make in each other's lives." Chloe smiled from the audience, her hand resting protectively on her still flat stomach, where their first child was growing, a tangible symbol of their love and commitment to the future. Rita sat proudly beside her, elegant in her evening gown, her eyes beaming with pride at the family she had helped shape through her unwavering love and wisdom. 2 years ago," James continued, his voice tinged with emotion, "I thought I understood success. I had built a company, accumulated wealth, and achieved everything I thought I wanted. But I was missing the most important thing of all. Someone to share it with who cared more about my character than my bank account." He found Chloe's gaze in the audience and smiled, his eyes filled with love and gratitude. "Tonight, we're not just raising money for families facing medical emergencies. We're celebrating the truth that the smallest acts of kindness can change everything. Sometimes," he added, his voice ringing with conviction, "helping a stranger isn't just the right thing to do. It's the first step toward discovering who you're meant to become." As thunderous applause filled the ballroom, Chloe thought about the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. From a missed job interview to a fairy tale wedding, from financial struggle to a shared sense of purpose, from two strangers in a traffic jam to a loving family building something meaningful together. She had missed her interview at Sterling Communications because she chose to help a stranger, never imagining that he was a millionaire. But more importantly, she had gained something far more valuable than any job could ever provide. A love story that began with kindness and would last a lifetime. The end.